be able to walk in, right?
Yes, she will. Yeah.
So it's not a special. Yeah.
You're listening to Money FM 89.3. Now, moving forward in a new era. That was the theme of this year's budget, delivered by Finance Minister Lawrence Wong in Parliament yesterday. On the social front, the budget tackled several long-standing issues, such as Singapore's low fertility rate and the retirement adequacy of seniors. At the same time, there will be more measures to reduce waiting times for new HDB flats and for businesses, more support for developing local enterprises and dealing with cost pressures. But the question is, how much is all of this going to cost?
That's right, Rachel. Well, Deputy Prime Minister Lawrence Wong's budget bouquet proposal has come in at 123.7 billion Sing dollars. That's about 18.2% of Singapore's GDP. And of course, the question is, well, how are we going to foot the bill? Well, new taxes have been introduced on housing, vehicles, and a 15% tax increase on tobacco. Well, to help us analyze this year's budget and what it means for you, we are joined now by Chew Woo Hong, partner and head of enterprise tax for KPMG in Singapore, Alvin Liu, senior economist at UOB, and Ryan Cho, deputy president of SMF, the Singapore Manufacturing Federation, and managing director for FarEastFlora.com.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us in the studio. We will also be joined very shortly by Dr. Gillian Koh, Deputy Director of the Institute of Policy Studies. But I want to start off with the cash handouts from this year's budget. We've got to start with the goodies, right? And that is
goodies.
good goodies. So we'll talk about the assurance package, and we did see a slew of cash handouts to help Singaporeans weather the immediate storm. A lot of people are talking about balancing the impact of inflation. To what extent do you think that the assurance booster does just that?
Well, it's something that we had expected. We talked about this before in the preview, right? But the amount of increase, of course, is much higher than what we originally anticipated. It was supposed to be 8 billion announced in November at the size of 8 billion. But then when we came to this point, right, it was about 9.6 already. So it's a 3 billion increase from the original 6.6 billion announced in 2022 budget. I think we would be still seeing that a lot of these are one-off, but it's because of the high inflation environment. I think the good part is it is trying to address a real issue that is on the ground, that is rising cost of living for a lot of people, households, individuals, but also at the same time trying to make sure that this is not going to be an ingrained kind of a mindset that there will always be this kind of handouts. Problem, of course, is inflation remains elevated for a longer period. Let's say it goes into 2024 and even 2025. So what gives then? But for now, I think this is good, but also there is a longer term issue at the backdrop.
What are your thoughts?
I agree with what Alvin has said. Because of inflation, high inflation, the package even now has to be significant. But at the same time, this is a short-term solution. In the longer, mid-term solution is that there will be incentives and support for businesses and workers to upgrade and upskill themselves so that they can be more relevant in the new economy, and also to increase their capabilities to command higher wages so that they can beat inflation in the future.
Yeah, Ryan, let's get your thoughts on this as well. Right? When you heard all the goodies coming in, and we're talking about CDC vouchers, you save rebates, and also cash for elders as well. What's your first impression when you heard the magnitude of the cash handouts?
Well, I think as a citizen, we're getting all these goodies. I'm very happy, right? Yeah, I think that in our chat groups, everybody said, yeah, it's good. It's a good thing. Nobody will reject anything that's given to them, so to speak. Yeah. I think especially like the CDC vouchers, I think it's going to benefit a lot of low-income families.
Mhm.
You've really seen that translate to real benefits going to the ground. I'm actually a volunteer at Northeast CDC. Yeah, so I've been there for about 13 years. So we at the council level, we talk a lot about all these things. Okay, and we've seen CDC vouchers delivering real value to
Okay.
the ground. And also, I think one of the things that was really effective is that you're only allowed to buy a certain range of products. And at the same time, it benefits the local merchants.
So it's targeted support for both sides.
Exactly. So I think that's a really good package
And while
that's
it's-
being rolled out.
And while it's targeted support for both sides, do you think that there were any groups that perhaps then fell through the cracks?
At the CDC level, we've always been very mindful, that if there's any one that needs help, that doesn't fit into this, demographics, we're always open, to understanding their issues and then also tailoring something to benefit them. So I would say that it's pretty comprehensive. Okay, and there's so far I've not heard a lot of issues on the ground in this area.
Yeah, I think what pretty comprehensive is what's being rolled out on the social front for families. We heard a lot of measures and policies being announced, and I was just looking at my chat group. Everyone's talking about this and that. For example, paternity leave, and we also have a lot of help for moms as well. So a lot of recognition for the role both sides play.
So this is interesting because we've spoken about this. I think we spoke about this during our budget conversations last year. We were looking for some budget goodies when it came to parents. And then this year it was delivered. I mean, 1 year too late for me, but and I was 8 months pregnant during last year's budget. But from your perspective, the three of you are fathers. We've seen paternity leave move from 2 weeks to 2 more weeks. What are your thoughts? I mean, is this helpful? We'll get into what it means for companies a little bit later on, but Alvin, perhaps for you.
I think at the start of it, I guess when you're not used to taking paternity leave, right, there's a bit of a mindset trying to adjustment. But I think as time passes and we get that the roles of the dual roles of two parents, right, is important in the development of the child, upbringing of child. So I think we will get towards that. But I think the good part is the government has recognized that the importance for the father to play in that role and to provide that, I guess, the incentive. And therefore we are slowly seeing people, we'll likely see people slowly move towards that to get used to that concept.
And for Wu Hong and Ryan, what are your thoughts in terms of what this means for businesses?
Yeah, I think for businesses, it's also a good messaging to staff, right? It's to educate them that the role of a father is just as important as us as a late mother. So not to worry about the cost. It's about getting the mindset correct, like what Erwin said. But guys, I'm also a father of children. Trust me, okay, the children have memories. They remember who changed their diapers. So better we better do something and work towards that. Yeah.
I don't know if my children remember I changed the diapers or not. Yeah.
Did you?
Oh, yes, I did.
But do you think from a business perspective, from your position as, a deputy president at the Singapore Manufacturing Federation, what does this mean for businesses?
Well, I first of all, I think it's very encouraging to learn about the extra paternity leave. I think if I'm a new father, I think that would be very encouraging and helpful. But coming from a business perspective, I would say that businesses would gradually need to cope with knowing that this is the new direction that the country is heading, right? It is important for fathers to play a more important role in the children's developing years. But I look at it and I'm thinking, well, when the pandemic was here, everybody was working from home, right? Yeah, so you probably will not affect those roles that you don't need to be physically present for example, on the factory floor in order for your production to work. Okay, so those that require you to be physically present may be a little bit more affected, with this leave. But eventually, I think businesses will learn how to cope.
We're just going to take a quick break for traffic and continue this conversation here on Money FM 89.3. Okay. Federation Managing Director, FarEastFlora.com. Yes, good morning, Gillian. Good to have you with us in the studio.
Thanks for inviting me.
It's
Good
wonderful
morning.
to have you. Thank you for joining us. We were just having a very interesting conversation about paternity leave, and I think we need to get into the other baby bonuses and benefits that we saw from this year's budget. Gillian, what's your take on the support for young families from this year's budget? A surprise? Were you expecting it?
Well, I think that the finance minister called this the Valentine's Day budget. So I think that was sort of expected, that more support be given to family formation. And I think the amounts that are now being committed to, the baby bonus package, including a cash handout, also sort of the top-ups to students' accounts of various means, I think will be important signal to young families, young couples who are considering sort of having the next child, because things do add up. And I suppose the outright gift at the start will help with expenses and just shift, that sort of sense of anxiety away to sort of some sense of security and comfort. Yes.
Yeah, it all ends up, and I think part of the equation is housing affordability. I think this is where, Alvin, you can share your thoughts on how there's now a increase in the housing grant for families purchasing, for example, 4-room and small units to get $30,000 extra for grants, and by $10,000 extra for 5-room or larger units. So all in, it's just to make it easier for first-time home buyers to get things off the ground, so to speak, because of the rising property prices here.
Including on that also the BOT measure that was given. I think they get one extra ballot.
BTO ballot.
BTO.
BTO
Yeah, that's right. One
ballots, yeah.
extra BTO ballot.
I think this is also very targeted in that sense that it is addressing part of a larger issue right now. And we know that last week in Parliament, this is widely debated on affordability and accessibility. And this targets specifically also for the first-time family. So I think this is it covers a lot of, how do I put it? It's a multi-pronged approach to one problem. That means for the first-time family, for them to start a family, then they have to have a place to stay, and you have to encourage them to give birth early. So you throw in all the baby bonus. So it's a very targeted approach to solve that fertility trend issue. But I think the housing affordability part is a good thing but it is also very targeted. It's for now to the first-time family owner.
What effects or ripple effects do you think this is likely going to have on the property market here in Singapore? Because we have seen rising rentals, rising property prices. Do you think this will start to ease the market?
Hard to say, really. We know that beyond this, right, we also had the stamp duty that will impact the higher end
That's
of the
right.
market. But again, as I talk to my colleagues here, friends here, the increment might be too little to move the needle because the segment that they are targeting, right, is very high end, and that may not change the
That's
needle
right.
too much for them.
That's right.
But for the first timers, for the housing grants itself, it certainly will help for them to encourage them to start a family earlier. Whether it will cause any distortion to the market, I do not think so for now.
Yeah, that send a signal to some extent. And talk about all the goodies we've been covering, comes the question of where does the money come from to pay for all these? And I think this is where the taxes come in. And we've seen some being announced on luxury and sin. For example, we've got the higher taxes for higher value property, luxury cars, and of course, tobacco. And this is something to look at more closely in terms of what we can expect. So KPMG Wu Hong, earlier on in the wish list they've put out, was looking for clarity on whether Singapore will be introducing wealth taxes in the near future. So how big a sign is this?
Yeah, I think this is a very clear indication that the form of wealth tax that the government is proposing is probably more indirect in terms of taxing the wealthy who have assets like cars, properties, rather than direct taxes like inheritance tax, estate duty tax, like other countries have imposed. So these will be the directions for wealth taxes lah. So of course, who knows, if we need more money, this kind of assets could be taxed more in future. Can make it more progressive. Yeah.
So you think there's a scale to move this up further?
Yes, I think there will be. Just remember last budget we have the increase in personal income tax. Then we have property tax increase. So this year we have stamp duty and of course sin tax, tobacco tax, right? Yeah. But put it the other way, you can control the taxes, right? You can don't buy the asset, you can don't smoke, and you can don't pay the taxes. So it's a very discretionary.
And Gillian, what are your thoughts on the tax? Because it is a luxury tax and a sin tax. Perhaps would you say that this is almost a Robin Hood budget, given the emphasis that we've seen on social spending?
It looks that way, so it's quite redistributive. And I think the trend, as Wu Hong has pointed out, is very clear that it would be indirect taxes to those who can afford it. And a real call to Singaporeans and everyone who's here to sort of say this, which is that those who can afford it, please see if you can, provide a little more support, because as you can see, the other side is true, that those who have less, those who are less well off are going to receive far more support. And I think this sense of solidarity is expressed through these very practical means. Having said that, I think we've seen the government resist direct wealth taxes, nothing to sort of impose on capital gains taxes. And I think that, Finance Minister has said previously, this is because if you do it the wrong way, people can always opt out and shift out of Singapore anyway. But if you're going to tax property, I think that's already fixed in Singapore, and a far more viable scheme to raise funds, fiscal resources in a way that will work.
Yeah, that was a very strong message that came through, that those who can do more should do more. And on that note as well is what's playing out on the tax landscape around the world, which is a push for a minimum tax of 15% for large companies. And on Singapore's approach is going to be implementing a domestic top-up tax, because right now it's under 15% for some companies effectively. So they're going to try to adjust it in time to come. And I'm just wondering what will be the implications of this new adjustment. And I'm going to start things with Alvin first, with the impact on Singapore's competitiveness as well as its revenue.
Well, okay, if we look at the tax revenue, the biggest component currently is still the corporate income tax. And of course, if you does this implementation itself, I think as what I think Minister Wong has alluded to earlier, right, the impact may not be so certain depending on which methods they choose. And also like to highlight that this is intended. They stated their intention, but they also highlighted that in the speech, right, this is up for review and update. I think this is also subject to what other countries will be actually taking place. I'm quite certain that Singapore doesn't want to be the first one to stick the neck out on this. And in this case, I don't think there's no first mover advantage.
Yeah, well, I
Absolutely
think there are
not.
some countries in Asia already pushing forward next year, and
Yeah.
Singapore is looking at perhaps a later date.
Yeah, I think there are a few considerations for delaying by a year is to make sure that the rules are what other countries are doing, and then so that when we formulate rules, we won't run foul of the international rules. That's one way to look at it. And the other way or observation I had is that it really gives Singapore more time to really retain companies that is based in Singapore and hone our competitiveness on the non-aspect part, propose other value proposition to attract MNEs to be here. Because when the 15% tax rate is imposed, if everybody is going to pay 15%, there's no advantage of Singapore coming to Singapore. That's the reason. Yeah.
That's a good point. And Ryan, just to get your perspective, what do you think this means in terms of Singapore's competitiveness as a business owner?
Well, I think that obviously the government is looking at this from a global perspective, right? And if the playing field is being leveled across the globe, then what is our competitiveness? And that's what I think that's why I think the government is pushing a lot into skill upgrading, right? And have training our workforce in the right skill sets, using the right technologies to upgrade the companies, etc. I think that's the only advantage that we have amongst many others, right? Singapore doesn't have any natural resources. Okay, the only thing that we have is our human capital. Okay, and you can see that a lot of MNCs are still here. And why are they still here? Because we've got a strong government, we've got the right legal framework to protect IP. And I think IP is going to be extremely important moving forward. Okay, so I would say that globally, Singapore will still remain extremely competitive, and companies, MNCs would still find this to be a very favorable place to land their offices in. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And on that note, we're going to take a short break now for the news. We're going to be back with you live in about 5 minutes on social media, but do keep it here on Money FM 89.3. We've got the news headlines coming up next.
Money FM is presented by UOB in partnership with KPMG. UOB, building the future of ASEAN.
On air, online, or on your smart speaker. Everything that matters to you only on Money FM 89.3.
He could be a sinner or a gentleman. He could be a preacher when your soul is
and as well as on the AYE towards Tuas between Lower Delta Road exit and Normanton exit. Stay safe.
If you see anything on the roads that we might have missed, you can share it with us via SMS or WhatsApp at 8855-0893. But please send the message through only when you are safely parked.
Heavy arrival traffic at Woodlands Checkpoint. Delays are expected and travelers are advised to check traffic conditions before embarking on their journey. Motorists are reminded to maintain lane discipline and cooperate with officers on site. Please follow ICA Facebook for more updates.
Money FM 89.3. Money FM Budget Conversations 2023 is presented by UOB in partnership with KPMG. UOB, building the future of ASEAN.
Thanks for staying with us here on Money FM 89.3. I'm Rachel Kelly with Ryan Huang, and we're joined in the studio today by Alvin Liu, Senior Economist at UOB, Chu Wu Hong, Partner Head of Enterprise Tax, KPMG in Singapore, Dr. Gillian Koh, Deputy Director, Research Institute of Policy Studies, Ryan Cho, Deputy President at the Singapore Manufacturing Federation, as well as Managing Director of FarEastFlora.com, to continue our special budget conversation in which we will give you a recap and review and why Budget 2023, what it means and how it matters to you. We're now going to put the spotlight on support for businesses. We've spoken about support for families and the cash handouts, but what handouts are there for companies to weather the upcoming storm, in particular when it comes to tackling manpower? Now, one of the interesting initiatives, and we were discussing this yesterday, Ryan, is the integrators.
Yeah, the job skills integrators. So this is the approach that the government is going for, that it sees a mismatch in skills needed and the skills in supply. And this is where the so-called middleman comes in to help match demand and supply, what's needed in the markets, to help companies to figure out what's going on. It does sound interesting, and I think we can get Ryan to weigh in on this, on what it means for the manufacturing sector, because I imagine demand for talent is quite fierce in the in the sector.
Right. So I think that the objective of this scheme is really to try to match, or try to match supply and demand, right? Are we training the right jobs, with the right skill sets? So when we look at the job integrators, I think a few examples come to mind. Singapore is gradually moving towards a more high-tech company, with advanced manufacturing. And the question is then, do we have the right manpower in place with the right skill sets, to be able to level the whole country up? Right. One of the case studies that we have already encountered, and this is already been done, is that the manufacturers need better skill sets in data analytics of their production line. Okay. As we know, traditional manufacturing can be very manual, and we don't use a lot of data to analyze whether the machines are productive, or whether the output is can be enhanced, right? So one of the programs that we worked on is called I 4.0 Human Capital Initiative, whereby we make use of a combination of technology and also train the staff to understand the data that the machines are generating, and we are able to help companies identify, well, maybe this part of the machine is not as productive and you have to fix it. Okay. But with this data, you also need people to interpret it, right? And that's where the retraining and the reskilling of the individuals come into place. Okay, so that part, I think, is for the manufacturing sector. I also like to share another example, and that is more specific to the retail sector. If you go to a retail shop now, the retail assistant maybe will just help you. Okay, yes, sir. How can I help you? This product is, good. This product is no good. But moving forward, and these are examples that we've seen in China, the retail assistant not only needs to know the product, but they also need to go, and promote the product on social media, which means that they need, a different skill sets in terms of presentation, in terms of
TikTok
using
skills.
TikTok skills. That's right.
okay, and to help to bring customers, either to go to the online shop or to come to the shop to buy their products. So I think, all these are different way of engaging the customers in order to, generate better revenue, which in turn will lead to better profitability for the businesses. Yeah. So the question then is, are the job integrators able to identify these future skill sets for the businesses and then find the supply to pump into the businesses?
And that's a good point. Do you see any challenges when it comes to implementation for this particular scheme?
Well, I think challenges will always be there, right? So to speak.
As a business owner,
Yeah.
I'm sure you're faced with so many pressures. Is that actually time to send people for training?
Training is important. Okay. I always I believe in the quote, if you don't send people for training, or rather the quote I think was that if you don't train the people, you can't do more for your company, right? So I think that it's a decision that the businesses need to make, whether to invest now, okay, or to lose the talent later.
Yeah, I echo what Ryan you just said, because some of my clients were saying that if you don't invest in training and the staff is so eager to learn new knowledge and acquire new knowledge, they will go to somewhere else that offer the training.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But also there are people taking up courses, willing to be trained, but they don't know whether having invested the time and money and appropriating government support for that, there will be a job at the end of the day that uplifts, their livelihoods, whether there'll be a promotion, whether there'll be really a successful shift into another career. So I think that sort of gap needs to be filled, and I think probably it will be helpful so that we make the most of what the government's spending in terms of support for skilling, reskilling, and companies setting up their corporate training centers. That's what it's got to be for. Right?
And when you're looking at reskilling, we are seeing the emergence of a number of new sectors, green jobs, digital jobs, right?
Indeed.
So whether you're skilling in the right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important to have that roadmap, so to speak, that you have something at the end of the day after going through all that training
Yeah,
on
for
both
the
sides.
workers, for the
Yeah.
workers.
We've also got to look at some of the other benefits that we've seen rolled out in this particular area. One, including the top up to the National Productivity Fund with $4 billion, as well as introducing the Enterprise Innovation Scheme for businesses to get larger tax deductions and activities like conducting research and development in Singapore. Alvin, which sectors do you think Singapore should prioritize? It's a lot to cover.
With a big push for innovation. Which sector
Yeah.
needs it the most?
I think in the statement itself, they have highlighted that few: precision engineering. We will think about as well as retail and wholesale, I guess, right?
Yep.
I think in by and large, if they also included further injections into the Global Enterprise Initiative and the SME Co-Investment Fund. I think in broad sense of it, right, you do see that they want to develop and help the companies, local companies, develop them and help them expand, go overseas. I think we in UOB itself, when we did a survey among our customers, right, corporate customers, they did say that this year itself, they need to know they are prioritizing reducing costs, but they also need to tap on new customer base, and also, of course, the upskilling and the reskilling of their talent pool itself, which is what we talked about. So in that sense, we do see the measures that were announced fitting into this, the bill of what the customers, the companies want. But there is some gaps. One of the big gaps, unfortunately, right, which was not announced, was much on manpower issues. Beyond I think there was some supporting workers for ex-offenders, and also the retirement, the older workers in terms of the CPF. But there's another. The issue that a lot of companies still face is within the short term is on manpower.
Yeah, I think on your wish list was DRC ceiling, dependency ratio ceiling.
The good part is, of course, there was nothing on the DRC at all. That means it's not changing, it's not tightening further. So that is the only good takeaway, I guess. But the short term, unfortunately, because if we are expecting the manufacturing sector is on a slight weaker footing right now, especially on the electronic side. But the in-person services sectors are expecting to recover stronger this year because of the reopening, especially of China reopening, and a lot more of the tourism, inbound tourism coming in. But that leads to that problem, right? If that short term where you get that pickup in recovery, but if you look at the numbers itself in terms of the foreign labor before COVID and currently, right, we still have a huge shortfall. And that is adding that pressure onto this services sector who are trying to recover and trying to make up for the surge in demand, but then they will have a lot of manpower issues they are still tackling with it. So that's a big problem that I see for this year.
Yeah, talking about pressures, I was just wondering, Ryan, when you talk about the manufacturing sector, right, you've got pressures on the energy side of things. Do you see enough for your sector right now? And how much of an issue is it for your sector? Are we looking at what sort of cost increases these days?
Well, we've got members coming to us, in the pharmaceutical space that have said that their electricity costs have gone up like 2 times and 3 times. Right, and these global MNCs, that's come to us for help to work with the government agencies. Well, I think, but across the board, you're also reading in the news, right? Even restaurants, catering businesses, central kitchens, their electricity costs have gone up by 2 times, 3 times. Yeah. So, personally, I was also looking at whether there's going to be something in the budget in this area. I don't think there's any, but maybe the government can reconsider how to help companies at least level this up in the near 6 months, 12 months, and hopefully when the global situation normalizes, then this cost can come down to a normalized level.
That's right. Manpower, energy, as well as other costs such as rentals impacting businesses. Just moving on, Woo Hong, I wanted to get your perspective on the tax deductions for R&D. How much do you think this will really move the needle and perhaps balance or counter some of those increased costs across the board that we're seeing?
Right. I think the enhanced tax deduction of 400% really will give a significant push to those companies that are still thinking whether they should undertake R&D. Especially even if you are not loss-making or not paying taxes, you still can get a non-taxable cash option payout if you undertake the R&D. So I think definitely this also signal to businesses that R&D is so important. Don't lose sight of it. Continue to push on for it, and that's where the help comes in. Yeah.
You're listening to Budget Conversations here on Money FM 89.3. We are live in the studio with Chee Woo Hong, Partner Head of Enterprise Tax KPMG in Singapore, Alvin Liu, Senior Economist at UOB, Dr. Gillian Koh, Deputy Director of Research at the Institute of Policy Studies, as well as Ryan Cho, Deputy President, Singapore Manufacturing Federation and Managing Director, FarEastFlora.com. We're going to take a short break now for traffic. We'll be back with you in just a minute. Keep it here on Money FM 89.3.
Money FM Budget Conversations 2023 is presented by UOB in partnership with KPMG. UOB, building the future of ASEAN.
Keeping stock on Money FM 89.3. Traffic.
Heavy traffic on the AYE towards the MCE between Jurong Town Hall entrance and Clementi Road exit. Stay safe.
If you see anything on the roads that we might have missed, you can share it with us via SMS or WhatsApp at 8855-0893. But please send the message through only when you are safely parked. Breakfast with Lindley, Ryan, and Rachel, only on Money FM 89.3.
Money FM Budget Conversations 2023 is presented by UOB in partnership with KPMG. UOB, building the future of ASEAN.
Thanks for staying. staying with us here on Money FM 89.3 as part of our special budget conversations. I'm Rachel Kelly with Ran Huang. We are joined in the studio, of course, by Chibu Hong, who is partner head of enterprise tax KPMG in Singapore, Alvin Liu, senior economist at UOB, Dr. Gillian Koh, deputy director research at the Institute of Policy Studies, and of course, Ryan Cho, deputy president, Singapore Manufacturing Federation. We've covered social support, we've covered cash handouts, we've covered benefits to business. Now it's time for us to take a look at the outlook and what's ahead, the road ahead following this year's budget.
Yeah, so in his speech, Finance Minister Lawrence Wong acknowledged that Singapore is a little red dot that's exposed to and vulnerable to external forces, but Singapore has the tenacity and courage to dream big and turn those dreams into reality. So, Julian, when you look at the budget in totality, how much are we on track towards being in line with those visions?
Well, I think certainly what stood out as a short-term help to tide us through the current very acute situation that we face with surging inflation due to all the disruptions, including the geopolitical disruptions. So there's that. But the long-term sort of trajectory is, as we've discussed, to really ensure that the golden goose that lays the golden eggs is strong. And as we move out of this period of recovery and transition, you see, as we have discussed, a lot of support to shift the economy towards something that is far more knowledge-driven, IP-driven, higher value add, and then on the side of workers to enable them, equip them to have the skills to take these jobs. Remember that Singapore received the largest haul of inflow of fixed asset investments last year. So really, Singapore is primed for the next even 20 years out from now to sort of do well economically, to try and beat the odds, really. So we're pushing back against the climate and the environment. So long and short of it is that, yes, this budget is for transition and certainly transition to higher GST. Next budget is also going to be a lot of support for the next transition in GST and taking then a sense of how the external environment is playing out upon us. And I think then you need another year or so to stabilize and consolidate, arriving at a new normal, whether it's the economic structure set within a new normal of geopolitics and the global economy, and ultimately a new normal for us as citizens in terms of better, stronger livelihoods coming out of the pandemic and the these crises, to find that we are a little safer and a little stronger. So I think the finance minister sort of emphasized that we have been through crises, gotten through them, arrived at a different level. So can we do this again, and how long will it take to get there?
And I think just to put things in perspective as well, I mean, this is the biggest budget ever in a non-COVID time. What does it tell you about Singapore's fiscal position, Wu Hong?
I think this is still a very, very prudent fiscal policy budget where the government understand the rising costs at the same time wanting to preserve our reserves. So it's important to have that foundation, which the finance minister keep saying. Yeah.
And I suppose he emphasized that that's our key form of insurance as a country, our national reserves. And I think the government has kept the faith in actually drawing on them when it's needed. Then the question is, if he has declared that this 40 billion that was used from the national reserves cannot be topped up in any foreseeable future, then what else can help us grow this rainy day fund? I think that is something that has to be looked at, and that's why growth is important. Growth will feed fiscal resources, and MOF put out an occasional paper to show that even with its projections, on spending and on inputs, there's going to be a fiscal gap. So I think that has to be closed up, and surely it'd be growth and doing better that will then provide us the resources to afford not just the livelihoods and the lifestyles that we want afford a transition to a fairer, more equitable Singapore, and afford one that's thriving within a very troubled world, or at least surviving in a very troubled world. So we need that a game plan to ensure that our national reserve are secure and growing as well.
Yeah, Julian, that's a very good point. I'm looking at the word resilience coming through very strongly in the budget. Alvin, when we look at the growth picture for Singapore, a lot of it is dependent on foreign investments and talent. So going forward, there's going to be this balancing act that Singapore needs to do. You know, you have to be in that sweet spot where you don't get in too much, at the same time not have enough for growth. How does Singapore approach the future years in terms of calibrating its policies?
And I think that's a key point as well in terms of competitiveness, how competitive it is globally now when it comes to attracting manpower.
I think for Singapore, right, we have a few existing conditions that are very good for attracting foreign talent. I think political stability here is one. I mean, we used to be boring little dot, right? Now we are slightly more fiery, more exciting with more things happening. So those help setting up the conditions. I mean, of course, our education system here for people to come here with startup families, all this will help to attract. And the tax itself is also a very attractive reason for talents to relocate here to work. But this should not be taken for a given, because we have seen the rise of other centers, and they continue to chip away shares from on a very global basis. I think somewhere in the Middle East is one good example, which my dear friend here is also going to. But I think we need to maintain, and we need to excel in some of the areas that we do. And I think in terms of this budget itself, right, we could see that there is things like that to encourage companies. It's not so much, and I think you rightly pointed out, Ryan, that this is going to be a balancing act, because if you have a great influx in terms of migration, right, the social compact there will be questions to the social compact which is what happened, I think, quite a few budgets ago. And as we put it, right, these are lessons learned. As with the pandemic, right, you shouldn't let the pandemic go to waste. You should learn things from there. And things that we learned from the pandemic is that a hybrid work system, right, is actually can be a good thing.
It's doable.
It's doable.
That's right.
It took a pandemic to push a lot of the companies, but then it did force a change in mindset. But I think it's pushing us in the right way. And I think that itself will also work towards us getting a more greater talent pool itself, because you can foresee that if remote working is possible, right, the person doesn't really need to be in Singapore to work.
That's right. So just very quickly to wrap up today's session, I'd like each of you to share what you think was missing from this year's budget that you didn't quite get to tick off your list, and whether or not you're actually satisfied with the overall budget.
Alvin, actually, I'm going to start with you because you're pushing for the 9% rate hike for
To be
GST.
pushed.
To push back
Yes.
another year.
Yeah.
That did not come through.
In one time.
Yeah, we were hoping that because in 2022 budget, right, they did that projection of 2 hikes, right, for GST, right, on the basis of the inflation outlook then. But fast forward 12 months later, right, the inflation outlook is much more elevated than what they have foreseen. So we thought on that basis alone, right, they might be a good consideration for a delay for the next GST hike. And beyond that itself, the two things, of course, manpower issues, we didn't see much short-term measures to help companies, especially those labor-dependent companies in services sector. The other one is of in terms of green
Sustainability.
Sustainability. I think a lot of companies, especially SMEs, also want to do this, but they lack that knowledge. They have a knowledge gap versus the MNCs, which are have better resources. We had hoped that maybe the government could step in as one of the bridge to help these SMEs, because in the end, right, when these SMEs go to go about their business, go into bidding for projects, right? Being sustainable, right, could be one of the criteria, and it will help them.
Actually, it is now already.
Yes.
Is that
Yeah,
what was on your
sustain-
wish list that didn't quite get checked off, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've earlier mentioned that I think helping companies offset their electricity bills is one very big factor right now, at least maybe for the short term, right? Helping SMEs leverage up on sustainability is important. In fact, there's a conversation going around right now in Singapore Manufacturing Federation. We are trying to develop a framework, to do a certain certification to help SMEs understand the importance of sustainability. So we're thinking along of the lines of like bronze, silver, gold certification, so that at least SMEs understand, in order to go towards the direction of sustainability, what are some basic blocks that they need to achieve. And that's important because, for manufacturers that are exporting to places like US and Europe, this is going to become a very big component. In fact, some of the top tier manufacturers, like one of our members who serves Tesla as a company, they need to pass this sustainability checklist. Okay, if not, you can't even become a supplier.
And that said, sustainability was on KPMG's checklist as well. Was it quite ticked off? Anything else?
Yes, it wasn't quite what we expect. We expect probably more support on the adopting green solution for businesses, green building, sustainability, and also like what Ryan says, right? So if our local enterprises don't up our game on sustainability, so and our methods of producing products and processes are not green in per se, there may be further import tax levied by the other countries if buying from Singapore.
That's correct.
So if this is the way to come, then we will have a problem. The other thing that I didn't see that in this year budget is probably a point on the corporate tax rebate. So I think if we have that will be a sweetener for some companies who just come out from COVID, and cash flow is still a big problem for them. Yeah.
Gillian?
Well, we're an aging society, so I was looking for a little more help for caregivers. I think there are people who actually have to either drop out of work or move into part-time work to take care of their seniors or children even. So, something along those lines would be probably quite welcome soon. But I think it was a great budget in terms of dealing with our very acute needs, dealing with inflation. So that's quite key, really. The second one is really about labor. And I think we saw the tightening of some tightening measures last budget, but how do we juggle ultimately the desire to kind of really pick up steam in terms of the economy, recognize that we're an aging society, so there's going to be less people of working age here, although the population is growing, the migrant workers are being brought back in and welcomed, but squaring the circle really is, for our ambitions, do we have the profile of people we need, and really at the end of the day also the quantum that is needed in order to play the big game of emerging stronger out of pandemic and these current troubles as the world retunes.
That's a great point to leave it on. Well, thank you all so much for joining us in the studio today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. We've been joined by Chi Woo Hong, Partner Head of Enterprise Tax, KPMG Singapore, Alvin Liu, Senior Economist, UOB, Dr. Gillian Ko, Deputy Director Research at the Institute of Policy Studies, as well as Ryan Cho, Deputy President, Singapore Manufacturing Federation, to break down the latest budget moves. Keep it here on Money FM 89.3.
Money FM Budget Conversations 2023 is presented by UOB in partnership with KPMG.